Hello there, welcome to The Perspective. My name is Florence Armein. Indonesia's foreign policy under Joko Widodo's administration has gained criticism over its inwardness, punching below its weight and very much driven by national interests. But that is seeing a shift. But to better understand about Indonesia's foreign policy and who makes the foreign policy in Joko Widodo's administration, we have just the expert who holds several strategic positions, including research professor at the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, LIPI, chairman for the Institute for Democracy and Human Rights at the Habibie Center, and Deputy for Government Policy Support at the Vice Presidential Secretariat. And that's just to name a few. But she has one and one name only, Professor Dewi Fortuna Anwar. Thank you for joining us this time around. I know this is a very interesting and busy time for you under the Jokowi administration. Now, we all are feeling and seeing infrastructure projects, maritime fulcrum. These are among the policies and programs that outshines foreign policy. Your take on that?
Well, Florence, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. You're right that in the beginning there was in fact a deliberate choice by then candidate Joko Widodo and then newly appointed President Joko Widodo to reorient the thrust of Indonesian foreign policy. During the earlier SBY administration, President SBY was very much a global player. He was very comfortable playing an internationalist role. And the tagline of Indonesian foreign policy then was 1,000 friends, zero enemies.
Zero enemies.
And Indonesia is in fact very, very active at the regional stage, at the global stage, and so on and so forth. So of course, you know, as a challenger, someone who is coming from a different party, candidate Joko Widodo tried to pitch a different line. His focus was that yes, Indonesia has a free and active foreign policy, that one must make sure that that foreign policy must be to serve the interests of the general public. So foreign policy must be down to earth. You know, it must be people-centered and so forth, and so on and so forth. So his emphasis is very much on how we can leverage foreign relations to assist with Indonesia's priority needs, and he has outlined all those priority needs: infrastructure development, transforming Indonesia into a global maritime fulcrum, and so on and so forth. So so that the emphasis was very much on direct benefits from foreign relations rather than how Indonesia would project its regional and international posture. So that was the case in the beginning, and of course that created a lot of comment because Indonesia had played a very active role in the past 10 years.
In your view, how do leaders in Southeast Asian countries seize this stance from Jokowi at the very beginning of his office?
In the beginning, there were a lot of concerns because Indonesia is the largest member of ASEAN, and the region has felt Indonesia's absence during the very traumatic time of our transition period between 1998 and till about 2003. Indonesia was so engrossed in its internal internal issues that we really had very little time and energy and resources, to play the kind of leadership role that is expected of Indonesia. So there was the feeling that Indonesia was absent and that there was a vacuum. And given the fact that ASEAN, according to its charter, is supposed to be the driver of the regional architecture building.
And Indonesia being one of the founders.
And Indonesia is one of the founders. So not only that, the weight of Indonesia within ASEAN, ASEAN will not really be able to carry the responsibility that it is supposed to carry without Indonesia driving it. So there were a lot of concerns whether Indonesia would abandon ASEAN and so on and so forth. But as you have seen, even despite the pronouncements that foreign policy would be much more down to earth, that foreign policy must deliver concrete benefits, Indonesia has not abandoned its bilateral, regional, or global.
So it's over exaggeration to say Indonesia has abandoned.
Yeah. So the rhetorics. It's campaign rhetorics and making a difference, and also there are certain emphasis being underlined. But I think in the final analysis, Indonesia continues to be the active member of regional and international community that that we are familiar
Just
with.
perhaps taking a different route than
Taking a different route, and
Jokowi's.
of course there are different emphasis.
Yeah.
There are of course certain differences. It is true that the thrust of President Jokowi's foreign policy now is how can we derive the most advantage from various international interaction. Therefore, there is a conscious choice of paying more attention to certain countries and organizations that will yield their benefits to Indonesia. So in a number of my comments, I've said, this reminds us of Suharto's earlier foreign policy. When he took over, when he established the new order government, and the primary objective then was how to ensure Indonesia's economic recovery. So he abandoned the very high profile, the mercusuar foreign policy, the lighthouse foreign policy of Sukarno, and deliberately adopted a much more modest, a lower profile, focusing on regional stability, and then also emphasizing key relations with major donor countries, for example, which could assist in opening the market, on bringing much needed investment, technical expertise, and so on and so forth. Joko Widodo, on the one hand, also takes pride in being, the heir of Sukarno, the emphasis on Trisakti, the sovereignty in politics, the self-sufficiency in the economy, and with a strong character, culturally very, very independent also. So there is that Sukarno's element, a pride in nationalism, but at the same time there is this more pragmatic orientation of the Suharto earlier period of foreign policy must deliver economic results. So in Jokowi's administration now we see that the mesh of these two different foreign policy legacies that he must continue. So yes, foreign policy must deliver direct economic benefits, but at the same time Indonesia also cannot really sideline its place in the region and on the global stage either.
It's great that you mentioned foreign policies that has been undertaken by previous leaders. We'll talk a little bit about that, a complex history of foreign policy between different presidents of Indonesia when we come back.